Hello, this is Mike Hines, and thank you very much for joining the A/B testing webinar today. Today we will be recording the webinar, and we will be making it available for replay later. One of the benefits of this is if you ask any questions using the control panel in GoToMeeting, and I don't get to answering it, or if I need to research an answer, we'll go ahead and publish the questions, and we'll go ahead and publish the answers along with the webinar when we post it for a replay. Those of you who are attending have been put
unmuted.
If you would like to ask a question or and ask your question by raising your hand or using the questions tab in your control panel. Wonderful. So the first question I usually get when I'm talking about Amazon and mobile devices is Amazon's interest in mobile devices limited exclusively to the Kindle Fire line of tablets? Quite frankly, that's not true. Amazon has Amazon Web Services, which is not only a great way to deploy your websites for pay-as-you-go cost free of capital outlay, but AWS also has a lot of services for mobile app developers that make getting access to data and getting access to other services easy in about half the time as without these great APIs from AWS. Amazon is also a company that loves to help people sell things, so we have a bunch of distribution channels for Android apps, including our own Android App Store and the aforementioned Kindle Fire devices. One of the things we like doing also is helping people who sell things make money at them. And we have a lot of monetization tools and monetization services that help you make money. Some of these are programs that don't require you to do anything to participate. For example, Amazon Coins, which gives app users in the Amazon App Store up to a 10% discount on a virtual currency they can use to buy your apps, helps people buy more content, and you still get this paid the same way you would as if they weren't using coins. Amazon shoulders the discount on that. Other programs include Test Drive, which lets someone try an app before they decide to buy it. And we also have a set of application programming interfaces, APIs, that help you make money, like in-app purchasing. You can actually sell physical goods through your digital app with the Mobile Associates program and earn a commission of up to 6% on any goods you sell on Amazon.com through your application. And we also have the A/B testing service, which lets you change how your app behaves after it's launched and gets into users' hands. We're also pleased to announce that we will now take web applications, particularly HTML5, and you can submit those to the Amazon App Store and they will run as would a regular native Android application. We have a pretty rich ecosystem that supports a lot of our services. For example, Unity is a very good support for our in-app purchasing. Conduit makes apps that are really easily deployed to the Amazon App Store, as well as Cocos, Adobe Air, and others. The Amazon App Store for Android is a fantastic program. It's actually free for developers to sign up for an account. You get the same 70/30 rev share that you do on other app stores, and it's also available for almost all Android devices. It is, for example, pre-installed on Android devices from Verizon, and it's available in almost 200 countries worldwide, including China. Importantly, it is the only app store that you'll find on the Kindle Fire devices. This is important because if you take a look at a recent survey, 42% of all Android tablet web traffic comes from the Kindle Fire family of Android tablet devices. The next closest competitor only has 7.2% of the web traffic. So if you want to be on an Android tablet device, being on the Kindle Fire is very important, and being on the Amazon App Store is how you get on the Kindle Fire. So, what is A/B testing? A/B testing is a great service that we make available for free that lets you learn how your customers use your code. For example, you can put in 2 different dialogue text messages that you want to try. In the past, past, when you wanted to test two messages, you've had to launch an APK with one dialog text message and try it for a while, and then replace the APK with one that has a different dialog, and then try to figure out which one did better. With Amazon's A/B testing insight service, what you can do is you can actually go ahead and put both in and test both. It'll actually let you give one of the text messages to half the users who download it, or any percentage of users that you like, and it'll give the other text message to the other half of downloaded users. You can then go ahead and take a look and see how each user behaves given that text message they received. For example, most people want to find out if that text message resulted in somebody buying an in-app purchase item. If somebody did buy an in-app purchase item, that will show up as a success percentage in your dev portal, and then you can easily see whether text message A or text message B resulted in more sales. If text message B results in far more sales, then it's a relatively simple thing to go ahead and convert everyone to text message B, not only new users and people who will download your app in the future, but also everybody who currently has the app can now get that new, more effective text message. This way you can test not only dialog boxes, but also new features. For example, if you have a feature that has, let's say, a speed of, let's say you're doing a first-person shooter game, and the bad guys have a speed and the good guys have a speed of the shots that they shoot. If you want people to progress through levels about after 20 minutes of gameplay, and you find out that the users are getting stuck or taking more than 20 minutes to get through, you might want to change some of the variables, including lowering the bad guy speed or increasing the shot ratios of the good guys. So you can go ahead and change how some of the features work in your application so that you get the desired performance. This is really easy to do because you can roll out these changes to everyone, and you don't need to submit a new APK. So let's go ahead and take a look at where it works. It works not only on the Amazon App Store, but it also works with APKs that you distribute through Google Play. So once you use the A/B testing API and you code in those features, it'll work regardless of what marketplace a user gets your app from. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and take a look at how we code this up. The first thing we want to do is start with the developer portal. Assume you have a developer account already. If you don't, it's actually free, and you can create one in about 30 minutes. For the purposes of this demo, I've logged into my account, and I've already started an app called A/B Testing. By selecting that app, by logging into my account and selecting that app, I can come over here to A/B Testing. The way to set up a new A/B test is first you'll need to add a new project. So I'll come down here to the bottom right-hand side and click Add a New Project. We'll add the project name, Project Test. How about Project Test? I like that. We can add a description if we want and save the project. The project name is actually pretty important. You'll need to make sure you remember what that is, because we'll use that inside the API when we call to get our variables. So now we have Project Test, but we don't have any experiments. So what we want to do is go down to the bottom right-hand side, and we're going to go ahead and add a new A/B test. We'll give the test a name, and for the purposes of this test, this really doesn't matter that much. So we'll just call this test. We can give it a description. And since we have the ability to count how well this is doing, we need two events. One event to start the measurement, and one event to measure success. In the case of our dialog box, we might say that this is the event render dialog. So we're going to render the dialog with one of two different messages. And then we may want to go ahead and have clicked buy as the success everybody hear me? Can you raise your hand on the tool if you can hear what I'm saying? Okay, great. It looks like we resolved that problem. Thank you, guys. So we're not going to use the counting views in the code today, because today we're simply going to go from hello world to retrieving one of two variables. But if you wanted to set up the measurement for that, you would use the custom event for counting views and custom event for counting conversions. Now here's where it gets fun. We have the variable name, and we can call this test variable. We can give this value foo, and we can give this value bar. And since I want half the users to get foo and half the users to get bar, I'll change variation b to 50, so that 50% will get message foo, 50% will get message bar, and I can at that point go ahead and save. Now, it's important to know that this is asynchronous, so by setting this one up now, it might take a little bit of time to propagate in the system. So I'm going to cancel that and go to one that I've already established. So I can find out which one I've already established by going back to the A/B testing home for, this is how you know it's a live demo. We can go back to, we should be able to go back. Well, we'll record that as a bug. Let me go back to my apps, come back here, and I'll take a look at the project new text that I've already got running. Click on Active Experiment, and you'll see that I have one test in project new text. Again, remember the project name, project new text. We'll see this again. So I have one experiment, which I'll click on. And now let's take a look at the variables that I've got by clicking Edit. You'll see that I've got two holidays here, Thanksgiving and Halloween, and half the users who use the app will get Halloween, half will get Thanksgiving. And notice the variable name, var new text. This is also important. We'll need to remember this because we will use var new text later. So we can save the A/B test. And since it's already running as an active test, I don't need to activate it. Had we been on the previous page, I would need to save it and then turn it into an active event. But in this case, the project name test new text is already active, so we can go ahead and start coding to that A/B test. So I'm going to go ahead and actually just create a new Hello World project here. And we'll call this and there we go. Minimum API level of 10 for the first generation Android device, and the current Android HDX devices are running API level 17. You can certainly compile with 18 if we need to. That's not going to cause any problems. Go ahead and accept the defaults for this. And we have Hello World. We have anytime now, Hello World. There we go. All right, that's much better. So the one of the things that you should probably do before you start this is come and we need to get to hold on here. I want to show you how to download the SDK. So we're going to bring up our dev portal again. and click on the green Download SDK button from developer.amazon.com SDK HTML. Because when you download the SDK, you'll actually get the external jar file that we need to go ahead and add to the project now. So I've already done that. So what I'm going to do is come to Project, Properties, Java Build Path, and I'm going to click on Libraries and Add External Jar File. The external jar file that I want to add is here. It lives in the directory where I've saved my Amazon SDK. So it'll be under, in this case, under Amazon Android. And we have a bunch of the different APIs here, each of which have their own external jar files. In this case, the A/B testing is in a folder called Amazon Insights. So I'm going to open up Amazon Insights, and under Libraries, we have the Amazon Insights jar file. I'll open that jar file, click Order and Export, and check the box, and we're good to go. So being that this is Hello World, what I want to do is I want to replace Hello World with either Thanksgiving or Halloween, as we saw when I showed you the test that I'd set up. So in order to be able to replace that, I need to go ahead and give that text area a label. So let me go and do that. And let me change that to ID, and that will work much better. There we go. I've given that a handle so that we can go ahead and change the text label. Don't need that file. Now, in order to get the variations from the Amazon server, we need to give our app permissions to go ahead and do that. So the next thing I'll need to do is open the manifest. And I'm going to need to give the manifest permissions for internet, and I'll also give it permissions for accessing the network state. And since you really shouldn't have to watch me try to type and talk at the same time too frequently, I'll go ahead and I'll paste those permissions in here. So we have the internet access and the network state. I'll save that. Good deal. And now we are done with the manifest. So we can come back to the main activity. In the main activity, I will go ahead and import the Amazon Insights file. Insights all is fine. So we'll go ahead and we'll add that. And now I want to add a variable that will hold the text. So I'll go ahead and add that as a public variable here. We'll call that new text, which sounds great. And we'll go ahead and we'll initialize that with the value of something that will let us know whether or not it's changed yet. So we'll call this default text. And as long as we're seeing default text, then we'll know that the A/B test hasn't replaced that yet. So here in onCreate, what I need to do is I need to go ahead and set some properties for our A/B testing choices. So I'm going to call the Insights options here. So we need to do two things. We need to create a credentials object, and we need to create an options object. So the first thing I'll do here is create the credentials object. We'll call it credentials for a good reason here. I'll show you in a bit. Notice that I'm using Amazon Insights here, and the new credentials is just fine here. So we'll go ahead and click the new credentials. And you'll notice that it's asking me for an application key and a private key. Holy cow, where do you get those? Hey, that's a great question. Let's take a look at where you get those. So back over here, I'm going to go ahead and take a look at my app. And I can go ahead and get the application key and other credentials here from within my app page there. And using the application key, I can grab that. Come back over here, pop that in, and then my private key, I can do similarly. So the private key is generated by the A/B testing. And I can view private key. I can see my private key here. I'll go ahead, grab that key, come back over here, and I'll paste that in. You'll notice that I should probably enclose these guys in quotes. Otherwise, that's going to run into problems. There we go. And now I've gone ahead and successfully created my credentials object. Now what I need to do is I need to create the options object. So we'll do much the same thing. Insights options, and we'll call this, well, options. Here we go. Insights new options, so we can go ahead and select that. And notice we have two options here: allow event collection and allow wide access, wide area network delivery. The event collection is if we had gone ahead and if we were going to code in those events for, say, the start and success event, we would say yes, allow event collection. In this case, since we're just going to retrieve the variables in this code sample, I'll say false because we don't intend to collect that. Allow wide area network delivery. If you're going to be moving a fair amount of data through your A/B test, you might want to be gentle to your users' bandwidth and bandwidth allocations. So you might want to force this to local area network delivery. Given that we're only going to be sending Halloween and Christmas, we can go ahead and set that option to true. Good deal. Now we've gone ahead and we've created the credentials and options object. Now it's time to actually create our instance of the insights object. So we'll create it and we'll call this the insights instance. And we'll go ahead and set that to we'll go ahead and set that to a new instance. And notice here that it's asking for three things. It's asking for credentials, which we've already given it and named credentials, so that's easy. We don't need to change anything. It's asking for options here, which we've already named options, so that's really handy. And then it needs app context. So we can do something fancy, or we can just use this, which I'll do in this case. And now we've gone ahead and instantiated our insights object. The next thing that we need to do is we need to create an A/B test client that we're going to use to retrieve our test variables. So I'm going to create that now. We'll call it A/B client, and this equals and we'll use the get A/B test client here. And now the AV client, we need to go ahead and get the variations. We're going to need to get the variations from the project that we created. So the first name that I asked you to remember, the project name, that's going to be really important here because it's going to ask for the argument. The argument for the get variations will be the project name. In this case, it was project new text. And what I want to do with project new text is when we get that variation back, I want to set a callback for that. Why? Because all of this is done asynchronously, and it may take a little bit of time for the server to get back to us with that. So we'll do a new insights callback to go ahead and collect that information. And so once we've got that variation set into our AV client, what we're going to need to do is when we get that back, we're going to need to parse that out. So at this point, that's not what I had in mind. That's still not what I had in mind. What I had in mind is actually closing my quotes there. That might make things a whole lot easier for me. There, much better. Now what I want to do is I want to create an onComplete object. And we'll get from this the variation set. And this we'll call this variations. Now, once we get variations back, we're going to need to go ahead and get our new variables out of that. So what I need to do is create a new object that we can go ahead and put that in. So let me go ahead and create that variation object here. I'll call this object var new text, and we'll go ahead and from the variations object we returned earlier, we'll go ahead and get variations. And again, here where it's asking for the argument, the input we want to give it here is the project name again. So project. So we'll give it project new text as that name. Notice we haven't used the test name itself anywhere. This is actually by design. Don't worry about that at this point. Right now we're just describing what project we're going to go ahead and pull the variations from. So I'm going to create a new variable here, or I'm going to go ahead and take the variable we created here and initialize to default text, and we need to give that a value that we're going to pull out of our variation result. So out of the variations that we have here, we created a variation from project new text, and now I need to pull a variable out of that variation. So I'm going to call this, we're going to use var new text variation that we got. We want to get the variable string from this. So when we get the variable string, we need to pass it two arguments. The first is the name of the variable that we want to get. So if you'll remember in our A/B test over here, so we can come back and actually take a look at that. Our active experiment had one variable name, and that variable name was That variable name was var new text. No, I shouldn't have used that twice. Anyway, our variable name is var new text. So we need to go ahead and get either Thanksgiving or Halloween from this var new text variable. The service will decide which one is appropriate to give the current user. So we don't have to do anything here other than ask for the var new text variable from the server. So here we're going to do var new text. Now, I need to put that in quotes. Good deal. If for whatever reason the user is offline, or if there's been a problem with the server side, we need to go ahead and put in the default value that we want users to have. And so I need to make this different than from the default text that I used when I initialized the variable. So we'll call this the AB default, so that we'll know that the AB service ended up using the default in this case. Now that I've done this, I need to go ahead and actually change my text label. Now, because this is asynchronous, I can't go ahead and do this outside of my current function. So I'm going to have to do this as a runnable, or if you wanted to, for example, if you were being really polite and you were doing all this asynchronous stuff outside of the UI thread, you could go ahead and establish a listener for when these variables are returned. But in this case, I'm going to do this in line here, well, because it's easier and I'm lazy. So we'll go ahead and create that. Find view by ID. There we go. And text view post. And we'll make that a new runnable. And I think I need to do that. And good. Now I can go ahead and I can put in the text view set text, and I'll go ahead and set that to the variable that we've created, new text. Excellent. And I just need to make sure that I've cleaned up all of my statements here. And that's not clean because I'm going to need to close that. There we go. Okay. If everything has gone according to plan, I should be able to run this, and after contacting the server, it should be able to pull back either Halloween or Thanksgiving, where we would normally have seen Hello World. So let's go ahead and give that a shot here. I've got an emulator launched, but I'll have it ask me in any case. Oh, come on here. Here's our emulator. Go ahead and launch that. And this is the exciting part, where we find out whether or not I've actually coded any mistakes in to the application. And then we can all raise our hands and actually let me know where I've made mistakes. Still working on loading. Here we go, hello world. Okay, we know that was going to happen because we are currently going to look at resetting that as soon as we get one of our variations. If the network times out, we should get the A/B test default or the A/B default. If it doesn't time out, we should get either Thanksgiving or Halloween. I've got a network connection. There we go, AB default. So unfortunately, it wasn't able to grab one of our two variables. So it's quite possible that I've made a mistake in here somewhere. Yeah. Or what I can do is come back over here and we can try that again to see if second time's a charm. See if it works a little faster this time. All right, I've made a mistake somewhere, and we're unable to contact the server. Let's see. I may not have my emulator set up correctly. Well, certainly in any case, this is certainly the right code to execute. I've got my correct credentials in there. Project new text, var new text. No, so the code is good, and I just need to make sure that I've got my emulator connected, and then we'll start getting the correct variation from that sample. And the next step in coding this out is to actually go ahead and isolate the text that you want to distribute so that you can go ahead and add your measurements to it, your events for your start and your success event. So what we can do in a future podcast or webcast is to go ahead and turn this into its own method get text, and then we can go ahead and create the dialog box with a yes and a no button, such that if a user is presented the dialog box, we'll go ahead and fire the start counting event, and then if the user clicks the yes dialog box, we'll listen to the button, and when the yes button is clicked, we'll go ahead and fire the success event and do whatever else your app may want to do. And that way you can start getting measurements from your A/B test, and those measurements will actually show up here in Active Experiment. So let's pause for a second and find out if we have any questions at this point. So if you have any questions, or if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the GoToMeeting question tool. Okay, we do have a question here. When I was A/B testing, I noticed delays in getting the variables, as well as results in viewing the results in the portal. And that's a good question. The portal doesn't update in real time. As a matter of fact, what the A/B testing service does with your app is it will cache those results and it will batch send them up. We really are trying to be careful with the bandwidth that we use, and we're trying to be very conscientious of that and with offline usage, so that if the user is using your application offline, we still want to be able to capture all of the events that the user is doing with your A/B testing. And so we'll go ahead and save that, and when the user connects again and we have a critical mass of data to send back, we'll go ahead and we'll send that back up to the A/B testing service. So the A/B testing service reports will not update in real time. Give it about sometimes 20 or 30 minutes before you start seeing results back in your A/B test. Good deal. Actually, that's a couple questions, which is good. So I'll give you a few minutes more for some additional questions. Okay, one of the things that I want to make sure that we can cover is the different kinds of tests that you can do. For example, if you wanted to test several different icons, you can certainly do that. You just need to have the icons loaded in your resources folder when you go ahead and publish the app. And then using your variables, you can either specify the name of the graphic that you want to use, or you can specify a variable to send down that will tell your code which icon it should display in any given condition. This has also been used actually for some fairly significant code changes as well. For example, one of our developers actually created 2 different classes that he wanted to test, class 1 and class 2, so that when a user's character engaged with a certain object, sometimes he wanted to test what would happen when they executed the first class, and then another when you executed the second class. So the variable values he simply put in were class 1 and class 2. And when his character interacted with the object in the user's hands, it would either go ahead and execute class 1, or it would go ahead and execute class 2, and then he had his success events fire upon return so that he could figure out which one was actually being better for his users and getting through his specific scenario. So you can test not just text for dialog boxes, but you can also test entire classes as well if you like. Some folks have actually gone ahead and use this to change things for specific events or holidays. So for example, they might have a handful of different background images, and what you can do with a bunch of different background images is you can go ahead and by setting the variation percentage to 100 for any of the given backgrounds, you can actually determine which background appears to the user when they launch their app. You do not always need to change the variable when the user interacts with your code. For example, here I've gone ahead and put the retrieval of the variation set in onCreate right where we're going ahead and showing the text. But you don't need to do that every time. For example, if you want a user to get the variable set once, but you never want it to change on them, what you can do is you can go ahead and retrieve the variation set variable and save it in user preferences. And then when you launch the application, before you go into the get variations function, you can check to see if the variation is not null in the user preferences. If they've already retrieved a user variation and the variable is not null, then you can go ahead and skip the functions that get the variation back from A/B testing. And that way the user will get one variable and they will keep that variable for as long as they have the app. If you want them to have it until you're done with the test, so you want one user to experience or play with your game with one particular variable for multiple sessions instead of having that variable change per session, but you want to be able to reset everything at some point in the future. What you can do is you can set up 2 different variables. So if we had a second variable here called reset, we could initially set 0 on variation B of reset true and have 100% variation reset false. And so what your code can do is it can check the variation reset variable. If the reset variable is false, then you go ahead and check to see if the user already has your first variable in user preferences, and if they do, you don't change it. But after you've decided how you want your app to behave after your multi-session testing, go ahead and set the reset variable name to 100% true. So when your app sees the true return from the reset variable, then you know that it doesn't matter if they already have a variation saved in user preferences. You're going to go ahead and retrieve the new value anyway, because by that time you'll have decided whether you want all variation A or all variation B in your results. So that's a good way that you can actually control and fine-tune how the code behaves through your variation sets and through your measurements. Any questions on that? Here's a great question. If you're using A/B testing in the Google Play apps, does it require that the Amazon App Store be installed on that device? No, it doesn't. That's a good question, but you'll notice here that what we're doing is we're actually calling out to the API that you've included. The API does not do a check to make sure that the Amazon App Store is installed. So if you take the APK that you sent to the Amazon App Store, the same APK will work even if you sideload it onto another Android device that doesn't have any store on it. So it is completely store independent. Good question. All right. I think that does it for questions. If you have additional questions that you haven't had a chance to type out, we're going to keep the live meeting open for just a few more minutes so that you can type in any last-minute questions that you have. And while we do that, I will go ahead and go on mute. And I look forward to being able to code with you again. And I promise that we'll work on getting my poor little emulator connected up properly so that we can actually retrieve those variations. Hey guys, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.